Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We are now in Children of Adam and the poem I Sing the Body Electric, and we are into section number 5. And in some ways we can think about section 5 as Whitman's attack on the patriarchy. Well, we'll see this is not new in our reading of the deathbed edition of Leaves of Grass. And as we've said, I Sing the Body Electric was a poem of 55 in the very first edition. But by the deathbed edition, it will sit in a very important place, right, within the entire corpus of Leaves of Grass. And to that degree, it won't be the first time that we've seen this kind of an attack on the patriarchy, but to some degree we're definitely going to see that Whitman is going to say something about the female as opposed and related to the male. Now, it's significant that I want to give you kind of an overview here. You can look at passages 5, 6, 7, and 8 as Whitman's treating the yin-yang idea. We studied this already many times in other lectures at learnstrong.net. But we're going to move first from the female, then to the male, then to the male, then to the female. So we're going to play this game back and forth throughout these next 4 passages, culminating, of course, in passage 9, as we've already said, that catalog passage of the body that will finish I Sing the Body Electric. Now, my assumption is that you've already been with us in the previous lectures at learnstrong.net. Down the left-hand side, the Talks with Walt playlist, all of the poems of the inscriptions, as well as starting from Pomona, all 52 sections of Song of Myself. And we hope that you've worked through everything preceding in Children of Adam, all the way up to and including passage number 4. Now, before I turn to passage number 5, I want to go back and do a little walk down memory lane in our Talks with Walt to passage number 40 of Song of Myself. Now, we've already, of course, annotated this closely in other lectures. I just want to remind you of the wording here, and I said it when we did 40, that we were going to come back to this. There are these echoes. Do you remember this? Flaunt of the sunshine, I need not your bask. Lie over, you light surfaces, only I force surfaces and depths also. Earth, you seem to look for something in my hands. Say, old top knot, what do you want? Man or woman? I might tell how I like you, but cannot. And might tell what it is in me, and what it is in you, but cannot. And might tell that pining I have, that pulse of my nights and days. Behold, I do not give lectures or a little charity. When I give myself. You there, impotent, loosen the knees, open your scarf chops till I blow grit within you. Spread your palms and lift the flaps of your pockets. I'm not to be denied. I compel, I have stores plenty and to spare, and anything I have, I bestow. I do not ask who you are. That is not important to me. You can do nothing and be nothing, but what I will enfold you. To cotton field drudge or cleaner of privies, I lean. On his right cheek I put the family kiss, and in my soul I swear I never will deny him. On women fit for conception, I start bigger and nimbler babes. This day I am jetting the stuff of far more arrogant republics. Now from that, we come to passage 5. This is the female form. A divine Nimbus exhales from head to foot. It attracts with fierce, undeniable attraction. I'm drawn by its breath as if I were no more than a helpless vapor. All falls aside but myself and it. Books, art, religion, time, the visible and solid earth, and what was expected of heaven or feared of hell are now consumed. Mad filaments, ungovernable shoots play out of it. The response likewise ungovernable. Hair, bosom, hips, bend of legs, negligent falling hands, all diffused, mine too diffused. Ebb stung by the flow and flow stung by the ebb. Love flesh, swelling and deliciously aching. Limitless, limpid jets of love, hot and enormous. Quivering jelly of love, white glow and delirious juice. Bridegroom night of love, working surely and softly into the prostrate dawn, undulating into the willing and yielding day, lost in the cleave of the clasping and sweet-fleshed day. Now we'll pause there to annotate. If you're going to say out loud, this is some pretty radical poetry You're right, but for 1855, it's way more than radical. It is nigh obscene. However, the reason why I read passage 40 from Song of Myself for you already, I hope it's self-evident, is that Whitman's already setting us up for a whole lot of the really radical things that he's going to play around with. Notice, first of all, the word this and the very opening line. This is the female form. Now notice, at the beginning of this poem, female is not capitalized in your edition. I hope you have your deathbed edition in front of you. By the end of this poem, female will be capitalized. And that, by the way, was a change from the 55 edition. He finished this poem with 2 extra lines that we'll get to at the end of our discussion. This is the female form. Notice it's not C, but this poem will end with the word C. In other words, these are pointing instructions of a kind, right? And then, of course, the minute we hear the word form, we can't help but think of our Plato's Republic and the theory of the forms, right? A divine nimbus. Now, nimbus, of course, is a classic term here because it's going to equate that halo that saints will have often in paintings and the like. He says a divine nimbus exhales from it, from head to foot. We're back to Song of Myself, passage 5 with the head to foot thing. This exhaling and breathing and all of that, we're going to get to breath 2 lines later. Notice he continues with this form. It attracts with fierce. He loves that word. Go back and look at it again, all the way through Leaves of Grass. Undeniable attraction, or other times it will be adhesiveness, right? I am, for the first time, the pronoun I is used. I'm drawn by its breath, the breath of the female form, as if I were no more than a helpless vapor. Now, this idea of being helpless later is going to be ungovernable. I think he learned a lot of this from his study of Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. That is to say, it is necessary. We can't stop it. In the same way, I think that Whitman's making the same argument here. Notice, he says, all falls aside. In other words, there's nothing else that matters other than this female form. All falls aside but myself and it. And then he gives the list. Books, art, religion. We've, of course, seen these lists before. The visible and solid earth. At this point in 55, he said the atmosphere and the fringed cloud. He got rid of that line. I'll let you consider why. And what was expected of heaven or feared of hell are now consumed. He's going to consume everything that is traditionally Christian religion of his day into this discussion of the female. And then he uses the word mad. Later it will be delirious juice, right? Mad filaments, ungovernable, again, just like helpless. Shoots play out of it. The response likewise, ungovernable. Again, it can't be helped. In other words, the force of the woman, of the female, is for Whitman profound. It cannot be stopped. Hair, bosom. You would think it would be lips, but here it's hips. Notice how he plays it. I'm telling you guys, he smiles all the way through these. I'm sure he's smiling all the way through this whole thing of writing. Of course, bend of legs, negligent falling hands, all diffused, mind too diffused. In other words, we're now getting ready for a sexual encounter. Ebb, that idea of ebb and flow. Stung is an interesting verb here. Stung by the flow and flow, stung by the ebb. And then, of course, instead of saying phallus, he'll just say love flesh. Love flesh swelling and deliciously aching. We're back up to pent-up aching rivers. Limitless, limpid jets of love. Hear all these L sounds. Hot and enormous. Of course, Whitman knows exactly what he's doing. And, of course, there will be people who will read to this point and they will stop in 55 and in 60. And, of course, sometimes even today and say, I've had enough, I'm done. Enormous, quivering jelly of love, white blow, and delirious juice. Now you understand why I gave you the reading from Song of Myself, passage 40. Bridegroom, night of love, working surely and softly. The repetitions of your S's, by the way, right? By the way, all the way back to White Blow has to make you think of Melville's Moby Dick, of course, a contemporary reading of Leaves of Grass. Bridegroom, night of love, working surely and softly into the prostrate dawn. Notice even the night and the day as spoken of as personas are themselves sexual. And notice we move from the night to the day. And then a word that he loves, undulating. And it's a fun word. And it's a fun word to say out loud and to read out loud. Undulating, notice all the L sounds. Undulating into the willing and yielding day. Lost, from mad to delirious to lost. In the cleave of and the clasping, notice your C sounds, and sweet, fleshed, day. In 55, by the way, sweet flesh was all one word. He kind of made it a word unto himself. Now, there's your introduction. And now he's going to finish the poem with two more or three more stanzas. Let's work through them quickly. This, the nucleus. Notice we started with Nimbus, now we're to nucleus. And then a dash that makes us think of Emily Dickinson. After the child is born of woman, man is born of woman. This is the bath of birth. This, the merge of small and large, and the outlet again. Now, in other words, what Whitman is going to argue in Children of Adam, as the collection of poems, is that the sexual interchange is not so much just about enjoyment, obviously delirious it is, but it's rather about production. The produced child of the vegetation is, the produced babe of the vegetation is the way he talked about it in Song of Myself, passage 6. Notice here, this nucleus, it's at the heart of everything. And immediately an astute reader will point out, oh, so you can read this set of lines as literally about two people hooking up and exchanging fluids, no question. But you can also read it as metaphoric as the building of a nation. This is why I think reading of Declaration of Independence is so valuable to this idea of necessity. Notice the child is born of woman, man is born of woman. This is the birth of birth. Okay, even using almost like religious language here. This, the merge from urge of small and large, again, back to our yin-yang idea, and the outlet, again, a few lines later will be exit. Be not ashamed, women. And you realize at this point that now speaking with that, we said before, it's almost like the oracular voice of a Tiresias. We think about T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. Notice here, though, don't be ashamed. Obviously, this is our discussion with Eve, right? Be not ashamed, women. Notice we move from the female to women. Your privilege encloses the rest. We're back to the word enclose. And is the exit of the rest. Again, outlet, exit. You are the gates of the body. You are the gates of the soul. And of course, we know that any reader of Whitman that has spent any time with Milton will know all about what is being addressed here on a number of levels. Of course, the whole notion of shame after the forbidden, in Milton's case, it's an apple, it's just fruit in the Genesis 3 account, right? Of course, we have a certain kind of horrific image of the gates of hell being guarded by this disgusting kind of monster, and then of course we have the gates of Eden that are going to be barred. So the idea of the use of gates here is significant. He finishes, the female contains, notice the use of the word all in this poem over and over, all qualities and tempers them. Notice the repetition of she, we're going to get at least 4 of them, right? She is in her place and moves with perfect, he loves this word, right? Perfect balance, harmony. She is all things duly veiled. She is both passive and active. It's almost as if, in response to Blake, Whitman wants to argue that the female and the woman contains both sides of yin and yang. Now, of course, he's going to make the same argument in passage number 6 about males, right? She is to conceive, we're back to conception, daughters as well as sons, and sons as well as daughters. And then he finishes with the word see, over and over again. We're going to get it 4 times. As I see my soul reflected in nature, notice nature capitalized, we cannot help but think of Emerson's Transparent Eyeball and of course his essay on nature. As I see through a mist, it's as if it's not really clear. 1 capitalized, right? With inexpressible completeness, again, we're back to this translinguistic idea. With inexpressible completeness, sanity, beauty, there's your 3. By the way, sanity was not in the 55 edition, and he added it. It's an interesting thing, right? In other words, he wants to emphasize that women are sane, not insane. In other words, completeness, sanity, beauty. See, the bent head, now of course we saw this in passage 5 of Song of Myself, that very radical sexual passage. See the bent head and arms folded over the breast. And of course we can think here of Mary in the Christian theology as well, right? The female, notice it's capitalized here. I see. In 55, though, that's not where he ended. He actually ended with these 2 lines. I see the bearer of great fruit, which is immortality. The good thereof is not tasted by roes, that is to say, debauched old men, and never can be. Now, he edited that line out, but it's fascinating that he would write that line originally. In other words, don't be a dirty old man when you read these poems, as he's speaking to his male readers. It's an interesting way to end the poem. I'll leave it to you to try and figure out, why did he edit those lines out in the end? Maybe he was listening to Emerson a bit after all. All right, let's finish quickly at 2a. Well, obviously the female is necessary, never lesser for Whitman, which is, again, his direct attack or his lecturing to the patriarchy that would in some ways place males over females. At 2b, notice all the repetitions in the anaphoria that we will hear here. I love the sounds. This is a great poem to read out loud. You can play that game on your own as well. At 3, I have mentioned Emerson's nature as well as oversoul. I'm going to mention Tilly Olson's classic essay here, Silences, the argument that she makes that it's not that women weren't artists all those years, it's just simply that males owned all of the printing presses and were able to silence women's voices until the 20th century. Finally, at 3b, a way to own a poem like this. Do you feel that the female is now fully recognized as necessary and equal to males? What are your thoughts on that? And speaking of males, let's turn now to passage number 6, and we'll play that game as well. I hope you're being challenged here. Thank you.